Okay, good morning everyone. Boker Tov, Shalom Aleichem. We're headed out of Morocco, but now we're holding in Chodesh Kislev, and I want to tell you about a particular city in Morocco that has an amazing phenomenon and is very relevant to Chodesh Kislev and the Yom Tov of Hanukkah. First, I want to give a big thank you to Daniel Harris for his historic camera work. Usually he videos Harav Agoin with Noach Isaac Olbaum, so it's a big honor that he came to help us out over here. Okay, I want to tell you about the city of Debdo in Morocco. Debdo is about 100 kilometers from Algeria, and it has a phenomenon that almost no other city in the world has. It's a beautiful city. The aesthetics, the scenery is breathtaking. It's surrounded by orchards, flourishing orchards. It's ablaze in light, and the road that leads to Debdo passes through valleys and streams. It's surrounded on three sides with majestic peaks, and in the winter, snow-capped mountains. When you go to Debdo, you can't help but call out Marabu Masecha Hashem. However, what's most unique about the city of Debdo is that the vast majority of the Jewish population of Debdo are Kohanim. I was wondering, all the Sfardim on our trip this time are Kohanim. I don't know if all Sfardim are Kohanim, but we're going to see actually there are cities in the world that the climate is only conducive to Kohanim. And as we're going to see, Leviim were not able to survive even in Debdo. The climate was such that Leviim could not stay in the city. If they would stay in the city more than nightfall, they would die. You know that? There's certain areas in the world that are only good for Kohanim and not Leviim. Yeah, I don't know, maybe like the Duchen, the climate by the Duchen and by the Aron Kodesh is only good for Kohanim. Maybe because the air conditioning over there is, it's higher up, the altitude on the Duchen, I can't explain it. But I want to tell you a little bit about the city of Debdo. The residents of Debdo came primarily from Spain, from the city of Seville. They came not in 1492. Does anyone remember 101 years earlier, the Jews of Portugal were expelled in 1391. There were many forced conversions in 1391, where the Jews of Seville came to Debdo. There were many prestigious families: Abarbanel, Avudraham, David, Gavishon, and HaKohen Sakili. Ever hear the name? Kohen Sakili. Sakili were the family names of Kohanim who came from Seville to Debdo. Where does Sakili come from? The gematria of Sakili is Tzadok. They were descendants of Tzadok HaKohen. Okay? So the Kohanim of Debdo were the descendants of Tzadok HaKohen. That's pretty amazing because they date back to what is known as biblical times. Tzadok HaKohen was a Kohen Gadol. When we say Kohen Gadol, we don't mean that was his last name. It means he was the Kohen Gadol, he was the high priest, right? And in the times of David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech. So the Kohanim of Sakili and Debdo were descendants of Kohen Gadol in the times of David and Shlomo. So when the Kohanim came in 1391, they were led by Rab David HaKohen. Rab David HaKohen came to an area, it was arid, it was dry, nothing grew in Debdo. That's why we're passing by like desert over here. That's what Debdo looked like, until Rab David HaKohen took a stick and he stuck it in the ground. And all of a sudden, a natural spring of water flourished. And he took it as a siman min hashamayim that this is where they should reside. So these Kohanim of Debdo trace back to the Kohanim of the Beis HaMikdash, and they had a law that they could not marry out of the priestly clan. If you're a Kohen of Debdo, you could only marry other Kohanim of Debdo. You couldn't marry Leviim, you couldn't marry Yisraelim, only Kohanim. In the city of Debdo, they had very unusual practices, very special practices, especially when it came to the Yom Tov of Hanukkah. Because Hanukkah was a miracle that happened al Yidei Koyanecha HaKadoshim in the city of Debdo. Not only did they say Hallel every day of Hanukkah, they said Hallel Shalem every night of Hanukkah. In the city of Debdo, they said Hallel Shalom every night of Chanukah. Do they do that in Pico? No. In Pico, Robertson, they don't do that. But in Debdo, Ir Kohanim, they did do that. They said Hallel Shalom with the bracha. By the way, in the Sefer on the Baba Sali, it's reported in Taflilat, where the Baba Sali lived, where his older brother Rab David lived. There were, you know how many Kohanim there were in Taflilat? None. There was not one Kohen in the whole city. Can you imagine a city? One city, it's Roiv Kohanim, and in Taflilat, no Kohanim. So they imported a Kohen. The name of this Kohen was Rabbi David. And they taught, the name of this Kohen was Rabbi Eliyahu. And Rabbi David Abi Chatzer Ateret Roshenu taught Rabbi Eliyahu Torah. And they were so enamored with this Kohen, Rabbi Eliyahu, that after Rabbi David brought Rabbi Eliyahu in, and Rabbi Eliyahu had a daughter, Rabbi David Abi Chatzera married the daughter of Rabbi Eliyahu HaKohen, who he imported from Debdo. And the Baba Sali honored his sister-in-law very greatly. First of all, she was Eishas Chaver of Rabbi David Abi Chatzera, and secondly, she was Bas Kohen. So can you imagine? They import the Kohen Rabbi Eliyahu, and Rabbi David Abi Chatzera marries his daughter. Now, why did they import the Kohen? They needed a Kohen for Pidyon Haben. They needed a Kohen for Berchat Kohanim. It's not like Ashkenazim when we duchen, once a yovel. They duchen every day, and it was very important for them to have a Kohen. Now, in the Sefer Kovetz Gilyonos Merech Nichayach, he brings from Rav Gad Amar that there was once an individual, Rabbi David Halevi, and Rabbi David Halevi moved from Debdo to Fez, and then he left Debdo and he went back to Fez. And nobody understood, why did Rabbi David Halevi leave the city of Debdo? Some suggest because he wanted to learn Torah from a well-known Rav, or the living quarters in Debdo were not conducive. But it is suggested that there, in the official chronicle of the city of Debdo, Ir HaKohanim, it says Levium were not allowed to live in Debdo more than one day. If a Levi would live there more than one day, he would die. The Levium in Debdo would die, so they were not allowed to live there more than one day. That's why we're not going to drive through, because I'm concerned maybe you don't know for sure who the Levium are. It's better safe than sorry. Okay, but if any of the Kohanim want to go to Debdo, then we're going to have a special taxi, and you'll probably make the flight. Okay. Now, another minhag they had in Debdo is for them. By the way, some of the family names of Kohanim of Debdo: Marciano, Ben Naim, Sakili, and they produced many generations of great lineage of Tamei Chachamim, Tzadikim, most notably the Sakili family. But in Debdo, as important and as moving and as inspirational as Chanukah is in all the Jewish world, Chanukah took on a completely different meaning in the city of Debdo, Ir HaKohanim. It was their Yom Tif. They took it personally, because they dated back to the Kohanim of the time of the Beis HaMikdash, and when they said the words in Al Anisim, Al Yedei Kohanecha HaKadoshim, they said it with a heart of flame, feeling their personal connection to the Yom Tif of Chanukah. So that's one of the amazing cities in Morocco, Debdo, Ir HaKohanim. May its memory be a blessing to all of Klal Yisrael. Shkayach.